We are coming to you right now with one of the most significant breaking developments out of the Middle East in recent memory. And honestly, if you are not paying attention to what is happening right now between the United States, Israel, and Iran, you need to stop everything and listen carefully because this affects every single American. A senior official has confirmed that Iran's intelligence minister was directly targeted in an overnight precision strike. And this is not just another military headline. This is a calculated, high level operation that signals a dramatic shift in how the United States and its allies are approaching the Iranian threat. Let that sink in for a moment. The intelligence minister of Iran, a man who officials say was responsible for building and supporting an entire global network of operatives designed to threaten the United States and other nations around the world, has been taken out. This is the kind of target that does not get approved lightly. This is the kind of decision that goes through the highest levels of military and political leadership before it is executed. And the fact that it happened tells you everything about how serious this situation has become. Now, let us walk through what we know so far, because there's a lot unfolding simultaneously, and every piece of this puzzle matters. On the ground in Israel, the situation remains extremely dangerous. Two civilians were confirmed dead in Ramat Gan, which is a city right on the outskirts of Tel Aviv, and the method of attack is deeply concerning. We are talking about cluster munitions. And for those of you who may not be familiar with what that means, these are weapons that scatter dozens of smaller explosive devices over a wide area. They rain down on civilian populations, and the damage they cause is indiscriminate and devastating. Reporters on the scene describe the aftermath as horrifying, with remnants of these munitions scattered across residential areas where families live, where children play, where people were just trying to go about their daily lives. And here's what makes this even more urgent. Even as these reports were being filed, new alerts were coming in, warning that additional ballistic missile fire was expected to hit Israel within minutes. Journalists covering this story had to literally stop their reporting mid sentence and run to bomb shelters. That is the reality on the ground right now. And it is a reality that millions of Israeli civilians are living through every single day. But here is where the story takes an even more dramatic turn. While Iran is launching these attacks toward Israel, the United States and Israel have been striking back with a level of precision and coordination that military analysts are calling historic. Overnight, new strikes were launched into the Lebanese capital of Beirut, and at least one high rise building was completely brought down. These are not random strikes. These are targeted operations going after specific infrastructure and leadership positions connected to groups that have been threatening stability across the entire region for years. And in Iran itself, the strikes are continuing with a very specific focus. The operations are targeting a particular wing of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And the strategic reasoning behind this is fascinating and important to understand. Officials have made it clear that one of the goals is to degrade the capacity of this wing of the IRGC so that they cannot do to the Iranian people what they have done in the past. And if you remember during the massive protests that swept through Iran, the IRGC cracked down on its own citizens with brutal and unforgiving force. The strategic thinking here is that by weakening this arm of the regime, you are not only protecting American and allied interests abroad, you are also potentially opening a window for the Iranian people themselves to have a voice. And that is a dimension of this operation that is not being discussed enough in mainstream coverage. Now, I want to bring in the NATO angle because this is where things get really heated on the political front back home. There are growing reports that President Trump is furious. And when I say furious, I mean a level of anger that those close to him say they have rarely seen over the lack of support from NATO allies during this operation. One prominent senator described it as pure arrogance from our NATO partners, and the argument being made is straightforward and hard to disagree with. The United States has been the backbone of NATO for decades. American taxpayers have funded the defense of Europe. American military personnel have put their lives on the line to protect alliance members, And now, when the United States is engaged in a major military operation that serves European interests just as much as it serves American interests, the silence and lack of participation from key allies is deafening. And this raises a fundamental question that every American should be asking. What is the point of having an alliance if the members of that alliance do not show up when it matters most? Former officials close to the administration are making the case that the current president is the primary reason NATO is still relevant today. That without American leadership pushing alliance members to invest in their own defense capabilities, the organization would have become obsolete years ago. And they are saying if NATO cannot be counted on during operations like this, then the entire future of the alliance needs to be reconsidered. And that is not an idle threat. That is a genuine policy discussion happening at the highest levels of government right now. Let us shift to the military assessment because despite the political tensions, what is happening on the operational front is remarkable by any objective standard. Former senior military advisors are describing this as one of the most successful military operations in United States history. And that is an extraordinary claim. But when you look at the metrics, it is hard to argue against it. Every objective that was established at the outset of this operation has been met or exceeded. The ability of Iranian proxies to launch attacks has been significantly degraded. Missile infrastructure has been systematically dismantled. Key elements of the Iranian naval capability have been neutralized, and high value leadership targets have been successfully engaged one after another. When you stack all of that together and consider that this has been accomplished in roughly 2 weeks, the scale of what has been achieved is genuinely historic. And yet, there is a debate happening in certain corners of the American media and even within some political circles questioning whether this operation has been a success. And frankly, that criticism does not hold up under any serious analysis. The metrics speak for themselves, the objectives speak for themselves, and the strategic position of the United States and its allies is stronger today than it was 16 days ago by every measurable standard. But I do want to address a report that came out this morning because it raises a legitimate concern that we should not ignore. According to major reporting, despite 2 weeks of relentless airstrikes, the Iranian regime is likely to remain in place for the time being. It is weakened, yes, but the assessment suggests it may actually become more hardlined, with the IRGC consolidating even greater control over the country's governance. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a setback, and I understand why some people would read that headline and feel discouraged. But let me offer some context and analysis here because I think it is important. First, this is a snapshot in time. It is one assessment at one moment during an operation that is still actively unfolding. The situation on the ground is not static. It is moving and evolving constantly. And what is true today may look completely different a week from now. Second, the trajectory matters more than any single data point. And the trajectory right now is clearly moving in a direction that favors the United States and its allies. Every day, the regime's capabilities are being further reduced, its leadership structure is being disrupted, and its ability to project power through proxies is being systematically dismantled. So while it is fair to point out that the regime still exists, it is equally fair to point out that the regime that exists today is far less capable, far less threatening, and far more vulnerable than the one that existed just over 2 weeks ago. And there are significant opportunities ahead for the administration to continue shaping this trajectory in the days and weeks to come. Now, here is something that I think is being drastically underreported, and it ties directly back to the breaking news we started with. The targeting of Iran's intelligence minister is not just a military victory, it is a direct blow to the infrastructure of global threats against American citizens. This individual was, according to officials, the architect of a network of operatives embedded in countries around the world, people positioned and waiting to carry out attacks against American interests and American lives. When you take that person off the battlefield, you are not just sending a message, You are actively disrupting a network that posed a real and present danger to people right here at home. And this brings us to what might be the most important part of this entire discussion: the domestic security angle. National security officials are scheduled to testify today about the global threats facing the United States, and the topics on the table are sobering. We are talking about the reality of cells operating within the United States. We are talking about individuals who may have been positioned inside our borders specifically to carry out attacks if and when they receive the order. And we are talking about lone actors who may be inspired by the current conflict to take matters into their own hands. This is not hypothetical. This is not fear mongering. This is the assessed reality according to the people whose job it is to keep this country safe. And it raises serious questions about border security and immigration policy that cannot be dismissed as political talking points. The argument being made by security officials is that years of inadequate border enforcement created vulnerabilities that are now manifesting as real and tangible threats. And regardless of where you stand politically, the safety of American families should be something that transcends partisan debate. We need to be honest about the challenges we face. We need to support the men and women in our intelligence and law enforcement communities who are working around the clock to identify and neutralize these threats. And we need to demand that our leaders prioritize the security of the homeland above all else. Now, taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture, what we are witnessing right now is a fundamental reshaping of the global strategic landscape. The moves being made are not just about Iran. They are about sending a message to every adversary of the United States that the era of unchecked aggression and unanswered provocation is over. When you look at the broader context, the pressure being applied simultaneously across multiple theaters, the willingness to take decisive action against high value targets, the demand that allies step up and contribute their fair share, all of it adds up to a posture that former officials say has not been seen from the United States since the mid 20th century. And whether you support every individual decision or not, the reality is that the global chessboard is being reset in a way that could define American foreign policy and national security for a generation. The question now is what comes next, and that is where things get really interesting. The strikes are continuing, the pressure is intensifying, and the regime in Iran is being forced to make decisions under conditions that are increasingly unfavorable. Every hour that passes, their options narrow and their position weakens. Meanwhile, the United States and Israel are demonstrating a level of military coordination and operational capability that has caught many observers by surprise. And that capability is not going away. If anything, it is accelerating. So here is my honest take on where we are. This is one of those moments in history where the decisions being made today will echo for decades. The outcome of what is happening in the Middle East right now will determine the security environment that our children and grandchildren inherit. It will shape whether adversarial nations feel emboldened to threaten American interests or whether they think twice before crossing that line. And it will test the alliances and partnerships that have been the foundation of global stability since the end of Second World War. We are living through history right now, and every American has a stake in how this plays out. I am going to continue bringing you every development as it happens, because in times like these, staying informed is not just important, it is essential. The world is watching, our adversaries are calculating, and the choices made in the coming days will shape the future in ways we are only beginning to understand. This is the moment, this is the story, and this is why it matters to every single one of us. If this breakdown helped you understand what is happening, make sure you are subscribed, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and stay with us because this story is far from over, and we will be here every step of the way to make sure you have the full picture.